Before the noise of the world instructs you who to become, there is a quieter invitation waiting inside your mind, and it does not shout for attention, it whispers with patience. That whisper is the love of wisdom, not as decoration for the intellect, but as a way of standing in life with clarity and courage. Socrates walked the streets without possessions, yet he carried a treasure that rulers feared, a disciplined hunger to understand what truly matters. Plato listened to that hunger and gave it form, shaping it into a path where learning is not accumulation but awakening. As you listen now, this path opens again, not in ancient Athens, but within your own choices, habits, and inner dialogue. The desire to learn, when genuine, does not flatter the ego, it humbles it. Socrates did not claim mastery, he practiced honesty toward his ignorance, and in that honesty he found freedom. When you allow yourself to admit what you do not know, tension loosens its grip. Pretending dissolves. Decisions become cleaner, because they are no longer built on fear of appearing weak. This is the first transformation wisdom brings. It replaces performance with presence. You stop acting a role and start living a question. From that question, life gains depth, like clear water revealing its bottom. Plato taught that the soul remembers truth when it is guided gently, not forced. Learning, then, is not violence against yourself, it is a return to alignment. Notice how often your days are driven by impulse, by borrowed opinions, by urgency that feels important but leaves no meaning behind. The love of wisdom interrupts this pattern. It slows the moment before action and asks for examination. In that pause, you regain authorship over your conduct. You begin choosing responses instead of reacting to shadows. This is not withdrawal from the world, it is a more skillful engagement with it. A calm mind is not produced by comfort, but by understanding. Socrates questioned craftsmen, poets, and politicians, not to humiliate them, but to reveal the limits of unexamined confidence. When you adopt this same attitude inwardly, you stop being ruled by unchecked assumptions. Each belief is invited to justify itself. Each desire must explain its cost. Through this inner dialogue, discipline emerges without cruelty. You do not force yourself to improve, you convince yourself. Reason becomes a companion, not a judge. Plato described the human condition as life inside a cave, where flickering images are mistaken for reality. In modern form, that cave is distraction, comparison, and endless stimulation. Wisdom does not destroy the cave, it teaches you to turn your head. When you turn, even slightly, priorities rearrange themselves. You notice that many pursuits promise fulfillment, yet deliver restlessness. The love of wisdom trains your vision to distinguish what nourishes from what merely excites. With that distinction, choices gain weight and direction. Your character is shaped less by dramatic moments than by daily orientation. Socrates believed virtue grows from knowledge, not slogans. When you understand why patience matters, patience becomes natural. When you grasp the consequences of injustice, integrity stops feeling like sacrifice. Learning, in this sense, is moral training. It refines judgment, steadies emotion, and gives endurance to values. You stop chasing approval and begin cultivating coherence between thought and action. There is quiet power in examining your life without self-contempt. Stoic calm flows naturally from this practice. Emotions are no longer enemies, they are signals to be interpreted. Desire is observed, not obeyed blindly. Fear is studied, not suppressed. Through thoughtful attention, you gain sovereignty over your inner state. This sovereignty is what ancient philosophers meant by freedom, not escape from duty, but mastery of response. The love of wisdom also reshapes how you relate to others. Socrates spoke through dialogue, not lectures, because truth reveals itself between minds that listen. When learning becomes your aim, conversation transforms. You seek understanding instead of victory. You ask instead of assuming. This approach softens conflict and deepens respect. Even disagreement becomes fertile ground rather than a battlefield. Such a stance quietly elevates your influence without demanding authority. Plato envisioned the philosopher not as a recluse, but as a guide who returns to help others see more clearly. When your decisions are rooted in understanding, people feel the steadiness around you. They sense deliberation instead of haste, principle instead of impulse. Your presence becomes instructive without preaching. This is leadership born from clarity, not control. As this reflection unfolds, remember that wisdom is not a finish line, it is a posture toward existence. Each day offers material for inquiry, each challenge an invitation to refine judgment. By loving wisdom, you choose depth over noise, direction over drift, and truth over comfort. The transformation does not announce itself loudly, it reveals itself gradually through better questions, calmer choices, and a life that feels internally aligned. This is where your journey begins, not with answers, but with devotion to understanding. Stay with that devotion, and you will notice how decisions sharpen, values stabilize, and the mind settles into a steady strength. In this steadiness, Socrates still speaks, Plato still guides, and your own life becomes the classroom where wisdom proves its worth. Another doorway opens when you stop treating learning as a tool for advantage and begin honoring it as a discipline of the soul. Plato understood this deeply. Knowledge pursued for status sharpens arrogance, while knowledge pursued for truth refines humility. Look closely at your own intentions. When you seek understanding only to appear superior, tension grows inside you. Yet when curiosity is sincere, the mind relaxes and becomes receptive. This shift alone changes the quality of your days. You are no longer rushing to prove yourself, you are training yourself to see clearly. Socrates never offered doctrines carved in stone. Instead, he cultivated a way of living that revolved around careful attention. He listened more than he spoke, and when he spoke, his words were measured, deliberate, and rooted in inquiry. From this practice emerges a powerful lesson for you. Wisdom grows in silence as much as in speech. When you reduce unnecessary commentary, your thoughts gain structure. When you resist instant judgment, insight finds space to arise. Calmness is not emptiness, it is readiness. Consider how many decisions are made while the mind is crowded. Anxiety pushes, desire pulls, habit dictates. The love of wisdom interrupts this chaos by asking for reasons. Why choose this path? Why value this outcome? Plato believed reason is the charioteer that guides the soul's forces, not by suppression, but by harmony. When reason leads, emotions fall into order. You stop being dragged by impulses and begin directing them. This inner coordination brings a quiet confidence that does not depend on external validation. Learning, in its truest form, reshapes your relationship with time. Instead of chasing immediate gratification, you develop patience for long-term meaning. Socrates accepted death rather than betray his commitment to examination, demonstrating that wisdom anchors priorities beyond fear. Reflect on this. When you know what matters, urgency loses its tyranny. You act deliberately, under pressure. This steadiness is not coldness, it is courage grounded in understanding. Plato warned against confusing opinion with knowledge. Opinions shift with mood and environment, while knowledge demands effort and testing. When you begin challenging your own conclusions, something remarkable happens. Resilience strengthens. You become less fragile in the face of criticism because your views are not ornaments, they are earned. Each belief has been examined, refined, and integrated. This process builds intellectual integrity, which naturally spills into moral strength. The Stoic calm you seek is not achieved by detachment from life, but by right relationship with it. Wisdom teaches proportion. Not every event deserves equal emotional investment. Not every obstacle threatens your core. Through reflection, you learn to distinguish what lies within your influence from what does not. This distinction brings peace without passivity. You engage fully where your effort matters and release tension where control is illusion. Socrates often spoke of care for the soul as the highest duty. This care requires regular inspection of motives, fears, and desires. When you neglect this inner work, life becomes reactive. When you commit to it, life becomes intentional. Plato saw education as the turning of the soul toward the good. Each time you choose understanding over impulse, you participate in this turning. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, your orientation changes. You begin aiming your life rather than drifting through it. Notice how wisdom alters your response to success and failure. Achievement no longer intoxicates you, and setbacks no longer define you. Both are seen as information rather than identity. This perspective grants emotional balance. You extract lessons without attaching your worth to outcomes. Such balance is rare, and its rarity gives it power. People trust those who are not shaken by extremes. The love of wisdom also deepens gratitude. When you understand the fragility of certainty and the effort required for clarity, you value insight wherever it appears. You respect teachers, experiences, and even difficulties, recognizing them as instruments of growth. This gratitude is not sentimental, it is grounded. It strengthens perseverance and keeps bitterness from taking root. Plato imagined the philosopher as one who has seen more, and therefore bears responsibility to act justly. Knowledge carries weight. As your understanding expands, so does your obligation to align action with principle. This alignment simplifies life. Choices may still be difficult, but confusion diminishes. You know why you act, even when the cost is high. That knowing sustains resolve. As this second reflection settles, allow it to recalibrate your approach to learning. Let curiosity guide rather than ambition. Let questions mature rather than rush toward conclusions. In this steady posture, wisdom stops being an abstract ideal and becomes a living force shaping your conduct. With each examined thought and deliberate choice, you continue the ancient dialogue, not as a spectator of philosophy, but as its embodiment. A different layer of transformation appears when wisdom is no longer treated as something you visit occasionally, but as something you live with constantly. Socrates did not separate philosophy from daily existence. He carried it into marketplaces, friendships, and moments of tension. In the same way, the love of wisdom asks you to remain awake during ordinary hours, not only during reflection. Each interaction becomes a mirror, revealing habits of thought that usually remain unseen. Through awareness, these habits lose their power to rule you unconsciously. Plato observed that most suffering comes from mistaking appearance for substance. You may recognize this when you pursue comfort, praise, or certainty, only to feel an emptiness afterward. Wisdom exposes this pattern gently. It does not condemn desire, it educates it. By understanding what truly satisfies, you stop feeding what only distracts. Over time, your energy shifts from chasing to cultivating. This change brings a quieter form of fulfillment, one that does not need constant reinforcement. When learning becomes sincere, your relationship with mistakes evolves. Socrates welcomed error because it pointed toward truth. Instead of hiding flaws, he examined them. You can do the same. Each misjudgment becomes instruction rather than shame. This attitude strengthens resilience and keeps pride flexible. Growth accelerates when defensiveness fades. Wisdom thrives where humility is practiced, not performed. The Stoic calm spoken of by later thinkers is already present in these foundations. It arises when you stop demanding that life obey your preferences. Plato's teaching suggests that harmony is achieved when each part of the soul fulfills its role. Reason clarifies direction, spirit provides strength, and desire follows guidance. When this order is respected, inner conflict reduces. You feel collected even during challenge because your mind is not fighting itself. Pay attention to how this inner order affects decision-making. Choices stop feeling like battles and start feeling like alignments. You weigh consequences without panic. You delay action without guilt. This measured pace protects you from regret. It also creates trust in your own judgment, a trust that does not rely on perfection, but on honesty. Socrates believed that an unexamined life fails not because it lacks success, but because it lacks depth. Depth emerges when you question the origins of your values. Why do you admire certain qualities? Why do some fears persist? Wisdom invites you to trace these threads back to their source. In doing so, you reclaim authority over your inner narrative. You stop inheriting meanings and begin authoring them. Plato described education as the shaping of attention. What you focus on expands, what you neglect withers. When you direct attention toward understanding, trivial concerns lose intensity. This does not make you indifferent, it makes you selective. You care deeply about fewer things, and that depth replaces the exhaustion of scattered concern. Life feels lighter, not because burdens vanish, but because they are carried with purpose. There is also a subtle ethical refinement that follows genuine learning. When you understand the consequences of your actions, cruelty becomes difficult to justify. Thoughtfulness naturally leads to restraint. You pause before speaking, not out of fear, but out of respect for truth. This restraint strengthens relationships and protects your integrity. Over time, your word gains weight because it is supported by reflection. Wisdom changes how you experience solitude. Instead of restlessness, solitude becomes conversation with yourself. Socrates treated inner dialogue as sacred. Through it, he refined motives and clarified aims. You can reclaim this practice by allowing moments of quiet without distraction. In these moments, insight surfaces without force. Solutions appear not because you chase them, but because you created space. Plato's vision of the good was not abstract perfection, it was alignment between understanding and action. Each time you choose clarity over convenience, you participate in that vision. The effect is cumulative. Small, thoughtful choices compound into character. Character then guides future choices, creating a cycle of integrity. As this third movement concludes, recognize that wisdom does not remove difficulty from life, it removes confusion about what difficulty means. Challenges become training rather than punishment. Uncertainty becomes invitation rather than threat. Through this shift, you step into a steadier form of strength, one that does not seek attention, yet quietly shapes every direction you take. Gradually, wisdom begins to alter the way you experience responsibility. Socrates never fled duty, he examined it. By questioning what justice required of him, he transformed obligation into conscious choice. When you approach responsibility with understanding rather than resistance, it loses its weight of resentment. Actions feel purposeful instead of imposed. This is a subtle liberation. You are no longer pushed by expectation, you are guided by principle. Plato taught that confusion arises when the soul is divided against itself. One part seeks comfort, another seeks honor, another seeks truth. When learning is neglected, these forces compete. When wisdom leads, they cooperate. Notice how internal conflict drains energy. The love of wisdom restores that energy by creating unity within. Decisions become simpler because your values are no longer fragmented. This unity changes how you respond to pressure. Under strain, unexamined beliefs collapse. Examined ones endure. Socrates faced trial and condemnation without bitterness because his reasoning was settled long before danger arrived. Preparation of the mind precedes calm in crisis. When you regularly reflect on what you stand for, emergencies do not rewrite your character. They reveal it. Consider how often impatience disguises itself as necessity. Plato warned that haste blinds judgment. Wisdom teaches timing. Not every opportunity deserves immediate action. Some require maturation, others restraint. When you learn to wait without anxiety, your actions gain precision. You move when the moment is ripe, not when fear demands motion. This patience is strength held in reserve. The Stoic quality of endurance grows naturally from this patience. Endurance is not numbness, it is informed acceptance. By understanding what cannot be changed, you conserve energy for what can. Socrates exemplified this by focusing on virtue rather than outcome. You too can redirect attention from results to conduct. When conduct is sound, peace follows regardless of circumstance. Wisdom also reshapes ambition. Plato did not condemn aspiration, he refined it. Ambition guided by understanding seeks excellence, not domination. It aims to improve capacity rather than inflate image. Reflect on your own pursuits. When ambition is purified, competition gives way to mastery. You measure progress against your own potential, not against others' applause. Through learning, language itself becomes more careful. Socrates valued precise words because vague speech hides vague thinking. When you speak with clarity, you think with clarity. This discipline reduces misunderstanding and strengthens trust. People listen differently when they sense deliberation behind your words. Silence, too, gains meaning when it is chosen, not forced. Plato's emphasis on order reminds you that a well-lived life is structured, not rigid. Routines support reflection. Boundaries protect focus. By organizing your days around what matters, you reduce friction. Life feels less chaotic because your priorities are visible. This structure is not constraint, it is alignment expressed in time. As wisdom deepens, your tolerance for superficiality diminishes. You become less impressed by noise and more attentive to substance. This shift may feel isolating at first, but it ultimately brings authenticity. Relationships deepen or fade based on shared depth, not convenience. Quality replaces quantity without regret. Socrates believed that care of the soul was a communal act. Your pursuit of wisdom benefits others by example. Calm spreads. Thoughtfulness invites reflection. Without instruction, you create an environment where understanding is valued. This influence is quiet, yet enduring. Plato envisioned a society guided by those who had trained their minds to see clearly. While you may not govern a city, you govern choices, reactions, and values. This governance shapes the world immediately around you. Each just decision reinforces order where chaos could have grown. As this fourth reflection settles, sense how wisdom reframes effort. Life does not become effortless, but effort becomes meaningful. You carry challenges without complaint because you recognize their role in refinement. In this recognition, discipline transforms into dignity, and learning becomes the steady ground on which your character stands. At a certain point, wisdom begins to influence not only what you choose, but how you endure what you do not choose. Socrates understood that control over events is limited, while control over judgment is vast. When this understanding settles into you, frustration loses its sharp edge. You stop arguing with reality and start working with it. Acceptance, in this sense, is not surrender, it is strategic clarity. Plato taught that disorder in the outer world disturbs you only when there is disorder within. A trained mind remains composed even when circumstances are unstable. Notice how emotional turbulence often arises from expectations that were never examined. Wisdom invites you to inspect those expectations carefully. When they are unreasonable, you release them. When they are just, you pursue them with patience. This discernment protects inner balance. The love of wisdom also alters how you experience effort. Instead of resisting difficulty, you begin to interpret it. Every challenge carries information. Socrates treated hardship as a teacher, not an enemy. By adopting this view, perseverance becomes natural. You no longer ask why obstacles exist. You ask what they demand of your character. This shift turns endurance into education. There is a profound calm that comes from understanding limits. Plato emphasized that harmony requires recognizing what belongs to each domain. You cannot command chance, but you can command intention. You cannot shape others' judgments, but you can shape your conduct. When these boundaries are respected, energy stops leaking into resentment. You act where action matters and remain steady where it does not. Wisdom refines emotional intelligence without turning you cold. Feelings are acknowledged, then examined. Anger reveals violated values. Fear highlights attachment. Desire signals potential growth. By studying these signals, you prevent them from governing behavior. This creates a quiet authority over yourself. Authority earned internally never needs to be announced. Socrates practiced restraint not because he despised pleasure, but because he valued freedom. Excess creates dependency. Dependency creates vulnerability. When you learn to enjoy without attachment, you regain independence. This independence is subtle yet powerful. It allows you to walk away from what compromises integrity and to wait calmly for what aligns with it. Plato's vision of the good life included balance between contemplation and action. Reflection without action stagnates. Action without reflection exhausts. Wisdom keeps these forces in rhythm. You think before you act, and you act upon what you have thought through. This rhythm sustains momentum without burnout. Life becomes a steady movement rather than a series of collisions. As understanding deepens, you begin to recognize patterns in your own behavior. Repeated reactions reveal unresolved beliefs. Wisdom does not rush to eliminate these patterns, it studies them. Through study, change occurs organically. You replace reflex with response. This transition marks a major inner advancement. You become less predictable to circumstance and more faithful to principle. Stoic calm emerges strongly at this stage. Calm is not the absence of emotion, it is the presence of proportion. You feel deeply, yet you are not overwhelmed. You care intensely, yet you are not possessed. This balance allows you to remain humane without becoming fragile. It is strength softened by understanding. Socrates' commitment to truth over comfort offers a final lesson here. When you prioritize truth, even uncomfortable truths, you build trust with yourself. Self-trust becomes the foundation for confidence. You no longer seek constant reassurance because your judgment has been tested and refined. This confidence is quiet, yet immovable. As this fifth movement concludes, sense how wisdom reshapes endurance into elegance. Life's weight does not vanish, but it rests differently upon you. Through understanding, you carry it upright. Through reflection, you carry it steadily. In this way, learning ceases to be an activity and becomes a way of standing in the world. Wisdom invites you to look beyond immediate appearances and habitual reactions. Socrates did not take things at face value, he probed beneath the surface, searching for essence rather than illusion. When you practice the same, life reveals its structure, its patterns and its hidden connections. Suddenly, events that once felt random or oppressive gain coherence. You begin to navigate circumstances with clarity instead of confusion, and choices that once felt overwhelming become manageable. Plato believed that the soul has innate capacities that lie dormant without cultivation. Observing yourself with care awakens these capacities. You notice impulses, tendencies, and instincts that have directed your actions unconsciously. By attending to them, you bring them into the light of reason. Each moment of self-examination becomes a form of liberation, a quiet expansion of freedom. Awareness transforms the ordinary into a field of possibility, where every thought can be refined and every intention considered. The love of wisdom sharpens discernment between transient and enduring value. Socrates asked questions that stripped away pretense to uncover what was essential. Apply this to your own life. Which pursuits nourish your mind, heart, and soul, and which merely entertain or distract? Distinguishing between them allows you to allocate energy where it truly matters. This skill alone reduces wasted effort and prevents emotional exhaustion. Priorities crystallize naturally, and with clarity, action gains precision. Learning also reshapes your relationship with fear. Plato described fear as a signal that the soul is attached to what is not within its control. By studying what is within your influence, fear loses its tyranny. Challenges still arise, but they are met with deliberation rather than panic. The mind maintains composure because it understands the boundaries of responsibility. Wisdom converts fear into a compass, directing attention toward what can be changed and away from what cannot. Reflection deepens empathy. Socrates modeled dialogue not as an instrument of dominance, but as a bridge toward understanding. By examining your own motives, you cultivate insight into others' motives. You recognize struggle, error, and limitation without judgment. This awareness does not make you passive. It equips you to act justly, with tact and compassion. Influence becomes subtle but profound, grounded in presence rather than persuasion. Plato's allegory of the cave reminds you that the mind often mistakes shadows for reality. Many experiences, opinions and emotions are projections, not truths. Wisdom teaches you to turn toward the light carefully, assessing what is real before reacting. This turning is deliberate, and it fosters stability in a world of shifting appearances. Life becomes less a series of shocks and more a series of considered engagements. Your attention itself becomes a tool for transformation. Socrates emphasized focused inquiry, not scattered curiosity. Where you place attention determines what grows within your mind. By choosing reflection over distraction, you cultivate depth. By choosing observation over assumption, you cultivate accuracy. Through disciplined attention, subtle layers of character are refined, shaping conduct without external enforcement. Sustained learning also encourages gratitude and humility. Plato understood that insight arrives not only through effort, but through encounter with what is greater than oneself: truth, beauty, reason. When you see that life is richer than your immediate desires, appreciation grows. Humility is not self-deprecation, it is recognition of the vastness of understanding yet to be attained. This perspective steadies ambition and tempers pride. Emotional equilibrium emerges as you study cause and effect in life. Socrates treated reactions as opportunities for insight, not obstacles. When you follow this practice, emotional turbulence diminishes because it is no longer treated as reality itself. Instead, emotion becomes data, informative, transient, and manageable. Calm becomes habitual, grounded not in suppression but in comprehension. Plato taught that philosophy is a guide, not a retreat. Wisdom does not separate you from life, it equips you to participate with integrity, insight, and presence. You act deliberately, speak thoughtfully, and carry values into each decision. As the love of wisdom embeds itself into your habits, it transforms both the visible and invisible dimensions of existence, turning ordinary living into art of mindful discernment and steady purpose. True wisdom transforms the rhythm of your inner life. Socrates observed that restless minds misinterpret events and magnify problems. By training attention and questioning assumptions, you quiet the turbulence. The love of wisdom is a practice of listening to your own reasoning, not as a way to dominate thought, but to harmonize it. As your mind settles, the chaos of fleeting impulses loses its hold, and clarity emerges in its place. Plato emphasized that learning is the turning of the soul toward truth. Each reflection, each inquiry, each moment of honest self-examination directs your attention to what is real, enduring, and significant. You begin to see patterns in your choices, to recognize recurring errors, and to understand where desire has misled you. With such insight, you act with intention rather than reaction. Your life moves from drift to deliberate motion. The love of wisdom also reshapes your perception of failure. Socrates treated setbacks as instruction, not as condemnation. When you study mistakes without self-punishment, you extract their lessons efficiently and without lingering regret. This process strengthens resilience, allowing you to navigate adversity with steadiness. Understanding replaces frustration, and patience grows naturally from that understanding. Reflection reveals the subtlety of influence. Plato argued that the philosopher, having seen more, bears responsibility to guide, not to control. In your own life, influence manifests through example. Your calm, thoughtful presence encourages others to pause, consider, and act with awareness. Leadership rooted in understanding creates trust without coercion and respect without demand. Wisdom turns personal development into communal benefit, emotional refi. Enlightenment accompanies intellectual growth. Socrates demonstrated that desires unchecked become entanglements. When you examine motives and temper impulses, your feelings gain proportion. Anger becomes a signal, not a weapon. Fear becomes guidance, not a barrier. Joy is appreciated more fully because it is not taken for granted. Each emotion is observed, interpreted, and integrated, producing equilibrium rather than repression. Plato's allegories reveal that reality is often veiled. Shadows, illusions, and assumptions masquerade as truth. Wisdom teaches you to discern what lies beneath surface appearances. By doing so, you free yourself from habitual misjudgments and act based on substance, not deception. Life becomes a landscape of choice rather than a sequence of surprises, and your decisions carry the weight of comprehension rather than impulse. Attention and focus become instruments of mastery. Socrates valued precise questioning, which clarified thought and eliminated confusion. You too can cultivate such precision. Each deliberate pause, each careful reflection, is a step toward aligning your behavior with your understanding. Gradually, the mind moves from scatter to coherence, and judgment gains reliability. Gratitude and humility deepen as understanding grows. Plato viewed knowledge as a reminder of what is greater than the self. Recognizing the vastness of what remains unknown fosters patience and tempers arrogance. Wisdom is not a trophy, it is an ongoing dialogue with life and reality, keeping your ambition directed while grounding your pride. Sustained engagement with learning strengthens moral judgment. Socrates argued that knowledge and virtue are inseparable. To know the good is to do the good. By consistently applying understanding to your choices, you cultivate integrity. Actions reflect thoughtfulness, and decisions gain moral weight. The process, there, shapes character quietly but profoundly, influencing both inner life and external behavior. Finally, wisdom turns ordinary moments into practice. Each encounter, task, and challenge becomes material for reflection and growth. Plato's ideal was not an escape from life into abstraction, but a disciplined immersion in it, guided by reason. With each conscious step, the love of wisdom integrates into daily living, transforming perception, choice, and action into a coherent, purposeful whole. The practice of wisdom transforms patience into a form of strength. Socrates understood that true insight cannot be rushed, and Plato emphasized that understanding matures gradually. You begin to perceive the value of waiting, not as delay, but as preparation. Impulse gives way to deliberation. Each decision, each action, is tempered by awareness. This measured approach generates confidence, not arrogance, because it is anchored in comprehension rather than wishful thinking. Reflection trains perception. Socrates questioned every assumption because unexamined beliefs cloud judgment. You can do the same. By observing thought patterns and habitual reactions, you detect biases before they dictate choices. This self-inquiry cultivates clarity and precision. Over time, you respond to circumstances rather than react, and discernment becomes habitual. Life's complexity is no longer intimidating, it becomes a field in which you move deliberately. Wisdom reshapes your relation to desire. Plato recognized that unchecked wants often lead to disturbance. By studying motivation, you learn to distinguish between fleeting cravings and genuine need. Desire becomes information, not command. This shift prevents frustration and aligns energy with purpose. As you refine intentions, effort becomes efficient, and satisfaction grows from accomplishment rather than mere consumption. Socrates demonstrated that dialogue is a tool for refinement. Conversations are not contests but mirrors reflecting hidden assumptions. In applying this principle, your interactions become opportunities for growth. Listening deeply and questioning kindly reveals more than debating ever could. Relationships gain authenticity. Respect deepens because engagement is thoughtful, not performative. The love of wisdom also transforms fear. Understanding the limits of control and the nature of consequence reduces unnecessary anxiety. Plato described reason as a guide through uncertainty. When you follow it, fear diminishes. Challenges remain, but they are met with calm vigilance. Each obstacle is interpreted, assessed, and addressed with steady attention rather than panic. Composure becomes a skill cultivated by consistent practice. Learning cultivates discernment between what matters and what does not. Socrates focused on the essential questions of life, not distractions of triviality. By doing the same, you allocate attention with intent. Energy no longer scatters into inconsequential concerns. Life gains simplicity without sacrifice of depth. You act with purpose, and each choice carries weight because it aligns with understanding. Patience, reflection, and discernment shape resilience. Plato saw the soul as capable of enduring challenge when ordered by reason. You notice that setbacks no longer erode confidence. Instead, they illuminate gaps in understanding. Wisdom treats adversity as feedback. Each difficulty becomes a guide for refinement, each error a lesson in composure. Growth occurs naturally when resistance is replaced by observation. Emotional intelligence emerges subtly. Socrates valued the examination of feelings as much as thoughts. Each reaction, each impulse, is an opportunity for study. Anger, attachment, and anxiety are interpreted, not suppressed. This creates equilibrium. Daily experience. Emotions inform action rather than dictate it, generating a calm authority over internal states that extends to outward behavior. The cultivation of clarity transforms action into service. Plato emphasized that knowledge is incomplete without application. When your understanding informs conduct, each act resonates with intention. Decisions become consistent with values, and life attains coherence. Influence flows quietly from presence rather than force, shaping outcomes through integrity and insight. Finally, the love of wisdom deepens your sense of purpose. Socrates suggested that an examined life is a life fully lived. Through reflection, understanding, and disciplined practice, you align your inner and outer worlds. Each day becomes a continuation of inquiry, and each choice a reflection of insight. In this ongoing dialogue with yourself and life, wisdom ceases to be theoretical. It becomes the lived experience of thoughtful, deliberate, and meaningful existence. Wisdom begins to refine the way you confront uncertainty. Socrates observed that much of human suffering stems from pretending to know what is unknowable. By embracing the limits of certainty, you cultivate a mind that is both alert and composed. Plato described reason as the charioteer of the soul, guiding impulses with discernment. When you allow reflection to precede action, hesitation transforms into careful judgment, and doubt becomes a tool rather than a hindrance. The love of wisdom reshapes ambition. Socrates valued virtue over reputation, understanding over applause. When you pursue knowledge sincerely, achievement ceases to be about recognition and becomes about growth. Each effort is measured against principle, not external reward. Through this alignment, actions gain meaning and character consolidates into strength. You act because it is right to act, not because it impraise, says others, and in this consistency, trust, both self-trust and the trust of others, naturally emerges. Reflection cultivates resilience. Plato emphasized that the soul, when disciplined, endures trial without being diminished. Setbacks are neither final nor personal, they are data points in a larger process of refinement. By interpreting adversity with insight, you transform challenge into instruction. Life's pressures no longer threaten equilibrium because inner comprehension provides a stable foundation. Patience grows, courage strengthens, and composure becomes habitual rather than occasional. Wisdom changes your relationship with emotion. Socrates taught that unchecked passions cloud judgment. When you observe feelings without yielding to them, you gain mastery over response. Fear becomes a signal, not a tyrant. Desire becomes informative, not commanding. Joy deepens because it is no longer superficial, and sorrow is navigated with understanding rather than consumed. Emotional intelligence arises naturally from disciplined self-examination. Plato's vision of knowledge emphasizes clarity over accumulation. Learning is not a collection of facts, but the refinement of perception. Each observation is examined for truth, each belief challenged for coherence. By training the mind to distinguish reality from appearance, your choices become informed rather than reactive. Life's complexity is navigated with precision, and the weight of decision is carried with grace rather than anxiety. Attention becomes a tool of liberation. Socrates demonstrated that focus uncovers hidden assumptions and illuminates motives. By directing attention deliberately, you cultivate insight and prevent distraction from leading behavior astray. Observing yourself, analyzing circumstances, and weighing responses become habitual, producing a mind that is awake, deliberate, and capable of discern. Meant in all situations. The love of wisdom deepens empathy. By understanding your own motives, errors, and limitations, you recognize similar patterns in others. Conversations shift from assertion to exploration, debate to dialogue. Relationships become grounded in understanding rather than superficial agreement. Influence arises from presence and insight rather than dominance, creating an environment where reflection is shared and understanding flourishes. Ethical integrity emerges naturally. Socrates argued that knowledge and virtue are inseparable. To know the good is to act rightly. Through disciplined examination, each choice aligns with principle, and each action reflects understanding. The life of the mind merges with the life of character. Decisions carry moral weight because they are informed by comprehension, not by habit or impulse. Finally, wisdom transforms ordinary experience into a field of growth. Every encounter, every decision, every challenge becomes material for reflection. Plato's guidance was not to retreat from life, but to engage it fully with insight. Each day becomes a laboratory of thought, conduct, and understanding. Through this continual practice, the love of wisdom integrates seamlessly into life, transforming existence into a coherent, deliberate, and meaningful expression of the mind and soul. The practice of wisdom reshapes the experience of choice itself. Socrates observed that many act under invisible pressures, habit, fear, or desire, without pausing to reflect. When you cultivate the love of wisdom, decision-making becomes a deliberate act rather than a reflex. Each option is weighed with clarity, and each action is guided by principle. This disciplined approach frees you from the tyranny of impulse and replaces uncertainty with measured confidence. Plato emphasized that knowledge aligns the soul with truth. When understanding guides action, choices are consistent, purposeful, and coherent. You begin to notice the subtle ways in which your past assumptions have shaped behavior unconsciously. By interrogating these patterns, you regain authority over your own life. Decisions no longer feel like compromises dictated by circumstance, but expressions of insight and integrity. Socrates taught that adversity is a mirror for character. Challenges reveal assumptions, expose weakness, and demand reflection. When approached through the lens of wisdom, difficulties become opportunities for self-cultivation rather than sources of despair. Each obstacle instructs, each trial clarifies. Resilience is built not by avoiding difficulty, but by navigating it with discernment and patience. Emotional mastery deepens through this practice. Plato noted that unchecked feelings distort perception. When you examine emotions with honesty, anger loses its intensity, fear is translated into awareness, and desire becomes an instrument rather than a master. By observing the ebb and flow of feeling, you respond deliberately rather than react impulsively. Calm arises naturally from comprehension rather than suppression. The love of wisdom cultivates clarity in relationships. Socrates engaged in dialogue to illuminate truth, not to assert dominance. In your interactions, listening with attention and questioning assumptions fosters understanding. Conflict is met with curiosity rather than defensiveness. Communication becomes an instrument of connection, revealing motives and clarifying intentions without manipulation. Presence carries influence more than words ever could. Reflection transforms ambition. Plato described the mind oriented toward virtue rather than vanity. When your efforts are guided by principle, achievements gain meaning and comparison fades. You measure progress against personal growth, not external recall. Each pursuit becomes a deliberate exercise in refinement rather than a performance for others' approval. Attention itself becomes a tool for freedom. Socrates valued focus because it uncovers hidden presuppositions and illuminates motives. By practicing deliberate observation, you notice subtle patterns in behavior and thought. Awareness becomes continuous rather than sporadic. The mind, once scattered, achieves coherence. Judgment, once clouded, attains reliability. Ethics and action converge. Plato asserted that knowledge without application is incomplete. Each insight is meant to guide behavior. As wisdom informs choice, integrity becomes habitual. You act with reason, purpose. Your decisions carry moral weight and consistency. Life becomes an expression of cultivated understanding rather than reactive motion. Finally, wisdom transforms perception of life itself. Ordinary moments become opportunities for study, reflection, and refinement. Each interaction, task, and challenge is observed, interpreted, and integrated. Socrates and Plato teach that the mind engaged with truth turns existence into a continuous practice of insight, calm, and principled action. Through disciplined devotion to understanding, life ceases to be a series of random events and becomes a coherent, deliberate, and meaningful journey. Wisdom begins to change your relationship with time. Socrates often reflected that most suffering arises from mismanaged attention, rushing toward future gains or clinging to past losses. When you cultivate the love of wisdom, each moment is regarded as material for reflection, not merely a passage to endure. Plato emphasized that reason orders the soul, and when your focus is intentional, the present becomes the arena of learning and growth. You no longer squander hours on trivial pursuits. Instead, each decision, each thought, and each action is oriented toward clarity and purpose. The practice of reflection transforms obstacles into allies. Socrates faced opposition and danger without compromise because he understood the limits of external control. You too learn to observe challenges as instruments of insight. Each difficulty highlights assumptions, tests patience, and refines character. Wisdom reframes adversity. It is no longer punishment, but opportunity. Resilience grows naturally when comprehension guides response rather than reaction. Emotional balance deepens. Plato recognized that the soul, when disciplined, attains proportionality between feeling and reason. Fear, anger, and desire are signals to interpret, not commands to obey. By examining motives and impulses carefully, emotions become guides instead of masters. This mastery does not diminish intensity. Rather, it allows for measured engagement. Joy is richer because it is appreciated consciously, and sorrow instructs rather than overwhelms. Attention and perception become refined tools. Socrates questioned constantly because unexamined assumptions obscure truth. Applying this within yourself, you notice recurring patterns, biases, and motivations that shape behavior unconsciously. Each insight allows deliberate correction. Thoughtfulness becomes habitual. Distraction loses dominance. With cultivated attention, decisions gain weight and life gains coherence. The love of wisdom also strengthens moral and social discernment. Plato viewed knowledge as inseparable from virtue. As your understanding of cause, consequence, and intention grows, your conduct aligns naturally with principle. Relationships benefit because actions are measured, words are precise, and influence arises from integrity rather than force. Presence becomes instructive, shaping the environment without overt direction. Patience and endurance are cultivated without coercion. Socrates demonstrated that strength lies not in avoidance of hardship, but in steadfast navigation of it. Challenges, delays, and discomfort are met with observation, analysis, and thoughtful response. Wisdom reframes endurance as engagement rather than suffering. You meet difficulty with equanimity because your reasoning provides a foundation for composure. Ambition and desire transform under reflection. Plato distinguished between superficial pursuit and meaningful striving. As understanding deepens, you pursue growth rather than validation, mastery rather than appearances. Goals are selected with insight. Effort is applied with purpose. Progress is measured against principle rather than applause, and the mind is free from distraction by empty comparisons. Finally, wisdom integrates life into a coherent journey. Socrates lived philosophy in every encounter, treating ordinary existence as a canvas for inquiry. Plato envisioned the philosopher as one who turns knowledge into practice. In the same way, each thought, choice, and action becomes material for cultivation. The love of wisdom is not an abstract ideal, it is a lived practice, shaping perception, conduct, and purpose. Through this disciplined engagement, life attains clarity, composure, and meaning, and the soul is trained to act with both depth and integrity. At the culmination of this reflection, consider how wisdom transforms the very essence of being. Socrates lived as though each moment were an opportunity to understand himself and the world. Plato refined this into a vision where the soul seeks alignment with truth. When you embrace the love of wisdom, life itself becomes a dialogue, a continuous engagement between perception, reflection, and action. You no longer drift under the weight of circumstance. Instead, each choice, each intention, and each encounter is shaped by insight and care. Understanding transforms suffering into instruction. Challenges that once threatened equilibrium now illuminate weaknesses to strengthen, patterns to correct, and principles to affirm. Socrates showed that fear of hardship dissipates when the mind is trained to discern what truly matters. Plato reminded that reason must guide, allowing the soul to act with courage and proportion. When you cultivate this approach, adversity becomes fertile ground for growth, and disappointment becomes a teacher rather than a burden. The love of wisdom refines the heart as well as the mind. Emotional impulses are observed, interpreted, and integrated. Anger signals injustice, desire signals opportunity, and fear signals boundaries. When these signals are understood, reactions are measured rather than impulsive. Joy is amplified because it is recognized consciously, and sorrow instructs because it is examined rather than resisted. This emotional clarity produces an inner harmony that shapes all actions and relationships. Clarity of perception deepens with practice. Socrates questioned relentlessly to expose hidden assumptions, and Plato taught that truth emerges from disciplined inquiry. By applying this to yourself, you begin to see recurring habits, biases, and misconceptions that have governed behavior unconsciously. Insight allows deliberate correction, thoughtfulness replaces distraction, and judgment becomes reliable. Life becomes navigable rather than overwhelming, and each decision carries weight because it is rooted in understanding. Moral integrity arises naturally from this discipline. Knowledge and virtue are inseparable. Understanding what is good informs action that is good. Decisions align with principle, and character consolidates through repeated practice. Relationships are strengthened, not through manipulation or performance, but through consistent integrity. Presence becomes a subtle yet powerful force, influencing others through example rather than command. Time itself is transformed. Moments are no longer ephemeral or wasted. Each is an opportunity for reflection, learning, and deliberate action. Ambition is refined, pursuits are chosen with insight, effort applied with purpose, and progress measured against principle rather than approval. Life moves with coherence rather than drift, guided by reason, reflection, and deliberate engagement. Finally, the love of wisdom integrates the entire existence into a living practice. Socrates demonstrated that philosophy is not a retreat from life, but a way to inhabit it fully. Plato taught that understanding must inform action to shape a harmonious soul. In your own life, each thought, choice, and action becomes a thread woven into a larger pattern of comprehension, composure, and purpose. Wisdom is no longer an abstract ideal, it is the lived experience of alignment between mind, heart, and world. Through this continuous cultivation, you step into a life where clarity governs perception, reason guides action, and understanding shapes every decision. Choices carry meaning, emotions inform insight, and each day becomes a disciplined practice of thought and conduct. The love of wisdom transforms existence into an intentional journey where the mind is awake, the soul is steady, and life itself becomes an expression of reflective, principled and enduring virtue. This is the culmination, not perfection but mastery over drift, impulsivity and confusion. The pursuit of wisdom is endless, yet each step reinforces stability, courage and moral clarity. Through dedicated reflection, disciplined observation and intentional action, you engage life fully, transforming ordinary experience into a coherent, purposeful and meaningful practice. In this, Socrates' questioning spirit and Plato's vision of aligned reason find their living presence within you.